So just sort of um a segue into that. Do you make art like who's your audience? Do you make art for your audience or do you make art for yourself?
It's a little bit of both. I think when I first started doing it as an adult, kind of pursuing art real seriously, my first instinct, because we live in a capitalist system, my first instinct was like, well, what's going to sell? How can I make portraits or draw comic characters that I know people will buy and things like that. But I really make it for myself, if I'm being honest. I think it's like the stuff that I'm making. I always joke that like all these dioramas is just an excuse for me to buy toys as an adult, and I think a lot of it is just me revisiting things, ideas that I had as a kid, or things I had questions about, or stories that I'd heard as a kid, whether it was like Hindu mythology, or it was some sci-fi movie that was on at 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday that I just happened to catch, or Star Trek episodes or something like that. So I really started to kind of practice art as a form of, I guess, like comfort and care for that younger version of myself. To kind of to really encourage that younger version of me to explore and to keep questioning things and looking at life and the world from a different perspective.
Nice. And I'm gonna interrupt you and stop you because I think there is noise coming from outside if you want to
Okay,
close your door.
sure, yeah, yeah, I'll be right back. All
No,
right.
I think it's interesting that you say that because I remember being a younger artist, or just even like just out of high school and college, and I went to art school and thinking that the kind of the same way that I want to make art to sell and make money, and then I kind of ran into different professors that they would often say, don't be so precious about your art and be so attached to criticism and that kind of never went away. So my paintings and my drawings, like I have, and I heard Mildred Howard say this one time too. Like she has her art that she makes for herself, and then she has art that she makes for museums and galleries. And so I
Mhm.
always have art that is I feel like okay, this is just for me, and I don't mind keeping it private. And then I have art that I'm not as attached to, that don't hold as precious, and so it ends up being for sale and I don't have a problem letting it go.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting to hear you say that because I think a lot of us, I don't know, for some reason we think that commercial art or selling art is really easy to do, but when you're really in tune and attached to it, a lot of the times I don't want to let it go, especially if I don't know the person. It's almost like my baby.
Right.
If I don't like you, I don't want you to buy my art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I do start, that's when I actually started making tie-dye. I was like, what can I do that's commercial that sells? And I could
Mhm.
care less if,
Mhm.
you buy it because I'm not attached to it, because I
Mhm.
enjoy the process of dyeing and making art and critique, but I definitely am not attached to it? So it's
Mhm.
interesting that you said, oh yeah, I started wanting to do portraits and things like, because yeah, we all go through that phase of, oh, how can I make money doing this?
Right.
And at some point you realize, oh, it's a little deeper than that.
And
It's
and I think, oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
So one of the things for me was realizing that the things, you can, and especially now in an era where you can just type in 10 words and have a machine generate art for you.
Right.
For me, the interest and the value in art was the actual creative process, and was whether that was me thinking back to ideas I'd had as a kid, or influences from my childhood, or it was I things that I wanted to kind of question and look into as an adult. That you mentioned kind of like selling stuff to people who you didn't really like, and to me, I always felt like those creations, the things that felt the most personal, one, they would give me an opportunity to talk about that stuff with other people, so it builds a
Mhm.
sort of community where I'm making weird alien art, and I can talk to people about what those aliens mean to me or what they mean to them, and kind of build a dialogue, even if it's somebody I don't necessarily see eye to eye on. We can have this moment of connection and communication,
Right.
and
No,
yeah,
I
that's
think that's kind of how I fell into making more personal zines. And
mhm.
I always credit Lawrence Lindell because he's so open about his zines about mental health and wellness
Yeah, Lawrence is
and his,
great.
yeah, and his personal stories. And
Mhm,
so I think that sort of helped me in that area where now I'm having these discussions around my personal zines that I never thought that I would have. Like people spill their whole life story and whatever they're going through and just tell
mhm,
me everything. And that connection, that bond, and like you said, build a community is really amazing.
mhm,
But I don't necessarily, I don't know, I haven't found that sort of connection when it's a larger painting or illustration. It's usually something story based.
mhm,
And I think that allows people access into me a little bit more. And
mhm.
that I really like. But it's
But
hard.
I,
I'm sorry, it's harder when
yeah.
it's something that people might need to interpret a little bit more, when it's
Mhm.
just a series of images and there are no words or text. So I don't know. I haven't found that because my art that is just paintings or illustrations, sometimes I don't know, I wouldn't categorize it as weird, but it's definitely more coded
Mhm,
and harder to access if you may not share some of the same morals or cultural backgrounds. Like you
mhm.
might not understand the little nuances, right?
Right, yeah.
But no, I've zine making has afforded me that opportunity to build those bridges, and so that's been amazing. Because I know you do zines and comics, and you
Mhm.
feel like you get discussions out of those more so than your illustrations or paintings.
Yeah, I think I do. I will also say I think that speaks to the zine, the audience. I think there's an incredible. To me, I'm always blown away whenever I do a marketing of call it a market and kind of talk with people about zines. People come to those events ready to talk, and they come with questions, and they come with their own. It feels like everyone is sort of coming in with a very open mind and coming in with a desire to connect with each other, which to me is such a great sign of community and a great sign of just the ability to kind of to connect as human beings.
Right.
And I think we're both kind of I guess on the older side of the zine making world, but I
For
see
sure.
in the younger generations, to me, like a lot of the zines that they're making and the stories they're telling and the kind of ideas they're communicating are much more upfront. And I think about this in terms of I was talking with my kid the other day about the X-Men and kind of what it meant for us growing up, where everything was coded and it was sort of like you need to understand that this is a metaphor, an allegory for civil rights
Right.
or queer rights or
Yeah.
persecution of all kinds. And now it feels like all of those things are right on the face, so you don't need to kind of hide any of that behind any sort of smoke and mirrors. It's just like,
100%.
here's how I believe, here are my politics, here is my idea of the world, and it's very straightforward.
No, that's beautiful. It is because